The mockery had become a daily ritual, as predictable as morning formation. Petra found herself dreading the coordination meetings, not because of the work itself, but because of what came after. Dominic had made her his personal project, and he was nothing if not dedicated. It started during a routine supply briefing. Petra stood at the front of the room, clipboard in hand, walking through ammunition requisitions for the upcoming training cycle. Her voice carried through the space, soft but clear, explaining the delivery schedules and storage protocols. She noticed Dominic in the back row, leaning toward the soldier next to him, lips moving in exaggerated whispers. The other soldier snorted, covering his mouth. When she finished, Dominic raised his hand. The gesture was mockingly formal, like a schoolchild seeking permission to speak. Petra nodded to him, though tension already coiled in her stomach. He stood slowly, making a show of it. "So, Captain," he said, his voice dripping with false concern, "I'm just wondering if you could speak up a bit. Some of us combat guys have hearing damage from actual firefights. Hard to catch everything when it's delivered like a bedtime story." Laughter rippled through the room. Not everyone joined in, but enough did. Petra felt heat rise in her cheeks, but kept her expression neutral. "I'll project more clearly, Staff Sergeant," she said simply. "Are there any questions about the supply schedule?" Dominic sat down, satisfied smile playing across his features. "No questions, ma'am. I'm sure you've got all figured out from your desk." The pattern repeated itself with variations. During a vehicle inspection, Dominic made a point of asking if she needed help identifying which end of the truck was the front. When she coordinated helicopter landing schedules, he asked if the noise would be too scary for her. Each comment drew laughs from his crew, and each time, Petra responded with professional courtesy that seemed to infuriate him even more. The turning point came when personnel files were updated in the system. Dominic somehow accessed deployment records, or perhaps someone shared them with him. Either way, he discovered what he'd suspected. Petra had never been assigned to a forward combat zone. Her deployments read like a logistics officer's resume. Coordination centers, supply hubs, administrative headquarters. Not a single firefight, not one direct engagement with enemy forces. He brought it up during lunch in the dining facility, his voice loud enough to carry across multiple tables. "Hey, Captain Lindholm, I was looking at deployment rosters. Interesting career you've had." Petra continued eating, not looking up. Dominic pressed on. "I've done 4 tours in active combat zones. Lost 3 brothers in arms. And here you are, coordinating paperwork from air-conditioned offices. Makes me wonder what you're even doing wearing that uniform." The dining facility had gone quiet. Soldiers at nearby tables pretended to focus on their meals, but everyone was listening. Petra set down her fork carefully, meeting Dominic's eyes. "I serve where I'm assigned, Staff Sergeant. Same as you. But we both know it's not the same," Dominic countered, leaning forward. "You've never heard a bullet crack past your head. Never pulled a trigger in anger. Never felt what it's like when everything goes wrong and people are counting on you to keep them alive." Petra stood, gathering her tray. "You're right," she said softly. "I haven't experienced those things." Her admission seemed to catch him off guard, but he recovered quickly. "Then maybe show some respect to those of us who have," he called after her as she walked away. "Maybe recognize that you're playing dress-up while real soldiers do the actual work." The incident changed something. Other personnel began treating Petra differently, maintaining polite distance. In briefings, her recommendations were questioned more aggressively. During equipment inspections, soldiers made subtle comments about whether logistics officers really understood field requirements. The isolation grew, a slow freeze-out that Petra endured with the same quiet composure she brought to everything. She spent more time alone, reviewing manifests in her small office, checking supply chain reports late into the evening. The work was meticulous and important, but it lacked the camaraderie that made military service bearable. She was competent, efficient, and utterly alone. Dominic's confidence grew with each successful humiliation. He began treating her dismissal as entertainment, gathering his squad before coordination meetings to prepare new jokes. They workshopped different ways to mimic her soft voice, practiced exaggerated concern expressions. It became bonding for them, a shared ritual that reinforced their identity as warriors and her status as an outsider. During a night patrol training exercise, Dominic's squad passed Petra's coordination station. She was updating route maps, ensuring communication protocols were properly documented. The light from her laptop screen illuminated her face in the darkness. Dominic couldn't resist. "Look at that, guys. While we're out here training to save lives, Captain Bedtime Story is making sure the paperwork is pretty." His squad laughed, voices carrying through the night. Petra didn't look up, didn't respond, just continued her work with steady hands. But later, alone in her quarters, she sat on her bunk and stared at her hands. They were steady, always steady, even when her heart hammered and her throat tightened with suppressed emotion. The steadiness was trained, thousands of hours of practice, until her body simply refused to shake regardless of circumstance. She flexed her fingers slowly, then reached under her bunk and pulled out a small case. Inside, wrapped in protective cloth, was a scope. Just a scope, nothing else. She didn't need to assemble the weapon to remember what it felt like. The weight, the balance, the perfect moment between breaths when everything else disappeared and only the target remained. She rewrapped the scope and returned it to its case, sliding it back under the bunk. Tomorrow there would be another meeting, another opportunity for Dominic to perform his routine mockery, another day of quiet endurance. The work still needed to be done, regardless of who respected her for doing it. That was enough. It had to be enough. The orders came down 3 weeks later, cutting through the monotony of daily operations like a knife. Joint multinational training exercise, counterterrorism scenarios, location classified until final briefing. Petra read through the logistics requirements with practiced efficiency, noting the complexity. Multiple nations involved, civilian airport environment, coordinated assault simulations across 4 terminals. The supply chain alone would be a nightmare, and she had 2 weeks to make it flawless. Dominic heard about the exercise during a tactical briefing and immediately sought out details. He found Petra in the warehouse, checking equipment manifests against physical inventory. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows across rows of crates and supply containers. She was crouched beside a weapons case, verifying serial numbers when his voice echoed through the space. "So, Captain Clipboard, I hear we're doing some real-world training." Petra stood slowly, turned to face him. Her expression remained neutral, though she recognized the gleam in his eyes. "The exercise begins in 13 days," she confirmed. "Your squad is assigned to Team 3, Terminal Assault Scenario." Dominic walked closer, hands in his pockets, the picture of casual arrogance. "And you'll be doing what exactly?" "Coordinating snacks for the big boys while they do the actual work." Petra returned her attention to the equipment case. "I'll be managing logistics coordination, supply distribution, and communication support." Dominic laughed, the sound sharp and mocking. "Of course you will. Wouldn't want you anywhere near actual tactical operations. Might get your feelings hurt." He crouched down beside her, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. "Tell me something, Petra. Do you ever wonder what it feels like? Real combat, real stakes?" She met his eyes, her voice as soft as ever. "Every day, Staff Sergeant." His smile faltered slightly, not expecting the honest answer. Then he recovered, standing and brushing off his pants. "Well, maybe you'll get to watch real soldiers work. Try to learn something." He walked away, whistling, leaving Petra alone among the supply crates. The next 2 weeks consumed Petra entirely. The exercise logistics were Byzantine in complexity. Ammunition quantities had to be calculated for multiple scenarios, medical supplies positioned strategically across the airport, communications equipment distributed to 17 different teams from 8 countries. Every detail mattered. Every calculation had to be perfect. She worked 16-hour days, surviving on coffee and brief snatches of sleep. Dominic's squad prepared with equal intensity, running drills and rehearsing assault patterns. They were good, Petra had to admit. Dominic might be insufferable, but he trained his people well. They moved with practiced efficiency, covering angles and communicating through hand signals with fluid precision. She watched them sometimes during equipment distribution, admiring the technical skill even as she dreaded the inevitable comments. Those comments came regularly. During a weapons check, Dominic made sure his entire squad was present before dressing her. "Captain," he said with exaggerated formality, "I need to request something special for the exercise." Petra looked up from her tablet. "What do you need?" He grinned. "Maybe some earplugs. You know, in case your coordination instructions come through the radio. Don't want that soothing voice putting us to sleep mid-assault." His squad erupted in laughter, several soldiers doubling over. Petra made a note on her tablet. "I'll ensure communications are tested for clarity and volume." "Anything else?" The non-reaction seemed to disappoint Dominic. He'd been expecting embarrassment, maybe anger. Her professional courtesy deflated his joke. "Yeah," he muttered. "Make sure the equipment actually works. Some of us will be depending on it in real scenarios someday." The implication stung more than the overt mockery. He was suggesting she was incompetent, that her work might get soldiers killed. Petra's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, the only sign that his words had landed. "I triple-check every piece of equipment, Staff Sergeant. Your team will have exactly what they need, functioning perfectly." She turned and walked away before he could respond, her hands trembling slightly as she gripped the tablet. That night, she allowed herself a moment of weakness. Sitting in her quarters, she pulled out a small notebook from her desk drawer. Inside were names, dates, distances. 89 entries, each one carefully documented in precise handwriting. She ran her finger down the list, remembering each shot, each situation, each life saved by her intervention. The notebook was contraband, technically, operational details from classified missions. But she kept it anyway, a private reminder of who she really was beneath the logistics officer uniform. She traced one entry near the bottom. Kandahar Province, 1680 meters, hostage rescue, 3 tangos eliminated, 0 collateral. That shot had earned her the Legion of Merit. The hostage had been a diplomat's daughter, 8 years old, held by insurgents in a compound that conventional assault couldn't penetrate without risking her life. Petra had set up on a ridgeline in 110-degree heat, waiting for 17 hours until the perfect moment presented itself. 3 shots in 4 seconds, each one threading through narrow windows at extreme range with wind gusting up to 15 miles per hour. The girl walked out alive. But here, in this forward operating base, coordinating supply chains and enduring daily mockery, that person didn't exist. That person was classified, buried under operational security and NITANA restrictions. Here, she was Captain Petra Lindholm, the soft-voiced logistics officer who'd never seen combat, never proved herself in the way these soldiers understood. She closed the notebook and returned it to the drawer. 3 more days until the exercise. 3 more days of preparation, of checking and rechecking every detail, of ensuring that when those soldiers went into their simulated scenarios, everything would function exactly as intended. Whether they respected her or not, she would do her job perfectly. That was all she could control. Dominic spent those final days in high spirits, energized by the coming exercise. He joked with his squad about showing the international observers how American Special Operations soldiers really worked. He fantasized aloud about the scenarios, wondering if they get to do building assaults or hostage rescue simulations. The prospect of performing in front of 4 military personnel clearly excited him. During final equipment distribution, he approached Petra one last time. "You know what, Captain? I'm actually grateful for you." She looked up, surprised by the apparent sincerity. "Why is that?" "Because," he said, leaning against a supply crate, "you make the rest of us look even better by comparison. You're like a reminder of what we're not. Soft, timid, hiding behind paperwork. Makes me proud to be a real soldier." Petra held his gaze for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I hope the exercise goes well for you, Staff Sergeant." "I truly do." The genuine quality of her voice seemed to unsettle him slightly. He pushed off the crate and walked away, looking back once with an expression caught between triumph and confusion. The transport convoy departed at 0400 hours, a line of vehicles stretching across the desert highway toward the exercise location. Petra rode in the logistics truck near the middle of the column, surrounded by equipment cases and supply containers. The metal case beside her seat bore innocuous markings. Survey equipment handled with care. No one questioned it. No one ever did. Dominic rode 3 vehicles ahead in a personnel carrier with his squad, already pumped with pre-mission energy despite the early hour. Through the convoy radio chatter, Petra could hear them joking, speculating about the scenarios they'd face, placing informal bets on which team would perform best. Dominic's voice cut through periodically, louder than the others, always performing, always needing to be the center of attention. 2 hours into the journey, someone made a comment about the logistics coordination being handled by Captain Lindholm. Dominic seized the opportunity immediately. "Oh, perfect," he said, his voice carrying clearly over the radio. "Nothing makes me feel safer going into a tactical scenario than knowing our supplies are managed by someone who sounds like they should be reading kids to sleep." His squad laughed. "At least if we run out of ammo, she can bore the enemy into submission." The logistics truck driver glanced at Petra, sympathy evident in his expression. She gave him a small smile and shook her head slightly. "Don't worry about it," she said quietly. "He's entitled to his opinions." The driver, a specialist named Chun who'd worked with Petra for 6 months, frowned. "He's entitled to shut his mouth, ma'am. You work harder than anyone on this base." Petra appreciated the loyalty, but didn't respond. She simply returned her attention to the tablet in her lap, reviewing deployment schedules. The convoy arrived at the airport as dawn broke across the horizon, painting the massive terminals in shades of orange and gold. The facility had been cleared of civilian traffic for the exercise, though it maintained full operational capability. Military vehicles filled the parking structures, personnel from 8 nations coordinating the complex training scenarios. The scale was impressive, hundreds of soldiers preparing for simultaneous operations across multiple terminals. Petra immediately immersed herself in coordination work, establishing the logistics hub in a converted maintenance hangar. Equipment had to be distributed, communications tested, medical stations verified. She moved through the organized chaos with quiet efficiency, directing personnel, checking manifests, solving problems before they escalated. Other officers sought her out constantly, recognizing her competence even if Dominic refused to. Dominic's squad went through orientation and scenario briefings in Terminal 3. They'd be part of the assault force responding to a simulated terrorist takeover, responsible for clearing the upper concourse and securing hostages. The briefing officer, a German colonel with 3 decades of experience, walked them through the tactical considerations: building layout, probable enemy positions, civilian evacuation routes. Dominic absorbed it all, mentally rehearsing approach angles and entry techniques. During a break, the teams gathered in the main terminal for equipment final checks. International observers wandered through, evaluating preparations, taking notes. The atmosphere was professional but charged with competitive energy. Everyone wanted to impress, to demonstrate their nation's tactical capabilities. Dominic spotted Petra across the terminal floor, directing a supply distribution team. He couldn't resist. "Hey, Sanderson," he called to one of his squad members loud enough to carry. "You see Captain Clipboard over there?" Sanderson followed his gaze. "Yeah, Sarge. What about her?" Dominic grinned, warming to his performance. "I'm thinking we should invite her to come watch us work. You know, educational opportunity. See what real tactical operations look like. Maybe she'll learn the difference between coordinating paperwork and actual combat." His voice carried further than he'd intended. Several nearby soldiers from other nations turned, watching the exchange. Petra heard it too, pausing in her work. She stood 50 meters away, tablet in hand, her expression unchanged. For a moment, their eyes met across the terminal floor. Dominic waved at her mockingly, exaggerating the gesture. Petra simply nodded once and returned to her work. A British sergeant standing nearby leaned toward Dominic. "That's Captain Lindholm, yeah?" Dominic nodded, pleased to have an audience. That's her. Logistics officer. Good at spreadsheets. Not much else. The British sergeant exchanged a glance with his companion, something unreadable in the look. Right, he said slowly. Logistics. Dominic missed the tone, already turning back to his squad. The afternoon was consumed by scenario rehearsals and communication tests. Teams ran through their assault patterns in empty terminals, practicing room clearing and tactical movement. Dominic's squad performed excellently, their movements crisp and coordinated. Even the international observers nodded approvingly. Dominic felt the satisfaction of validation, the pride of demonstrating American military excellence on a global stage. Between scenarios, he gathered his squad in a terminal restaurant that had been converted to a rest area. They reviewed their performance, discussing minor adjustments and refinements. The mood was confident, bordering on cocky. "We're going to smoke this exercise," Dominic told them. "Show these international teams how it's really done." The squad nodded agreement, feeding off their sergeant's energy. Petra appeared in the doorway, carrying an equipment inventory report that needed Dominic's signature. She approached the table quietly, setting the tablet down. "Staff Sergeant Carver, I need you to verify receipt of the additional ammunition allocation for tomorrow's scenarios." Dominic barely glanced at the screen before scrawling his signature. "Sure thing, Captain, though I doubt we'll need it. We tend to hit what we aim at first try." His squad snickered. Petra retrieved the tablet. "I'm sure you're very skilled," she said softly. The comment wasn't sarcastic, was a mocking. It was simply stated fact, which somehow made it worse in Dominic's mind. He leaned back in his chair, studying her with open contempt. "You know what I don't get about you, Petra?" She waited, not taking the bait, but not walking away either. "You wear the uniform, you do the work, but you've never actually been tested. Never had to prove yourself when everything's on the line. How do you live with that?" The question hung in the air. Petra's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes, something hard and cold that was gone before anyone could identify it. "I live with it the same way everyone does, Staff Sergeant. One day at a time." She turned and walked away, her footsteps quiet on the terminal floor. Dominic watched her go, shaking his head. "See what I mean? No fire, no passion, just quiet acceptance of mediocrity." What he didn't see was Petra's hands tightening around the tablet as she walked, knuckles white with suppressed tension. He didn't see her pause in an empty corridor, closing her eyes and taking 3 slow breaths, the calming technique she'd learned years ago to control her heart rate before critical shots. He didn't see her pull out her phone and look at the single photo stored there. Herself standing with her team after the hostage rescue in Kandahar, the diplomat's daughter's arms wrapped around her neck, the Medal of Valor presentation ceremony 2 months later. She deleted the photo, as she always did after looking at it, maintaining operational security. Then she straightened her uniform, smoothed her expression back to professional neutrality, and returned to her coordination work. The exercise would begin at 0600 tomorrow. Everything had to be perfect. Whatever Dominic Carver thought of her capabilities, whatever mockery he chose to inflict, the mission requirements remained unchanged. Soldiers would depend on her logistics coordination whether they respected her or not. That was enough. It had to be enough. The exercise began with precision at 0600 hours, scenarios activating across all 4 terminals simultaneously. Simulated terrorists took positions, role players acting as hostages screamed convincingly, and assault teams moved into action. The coordination center buzzed with activity, radio chatter filling the air as teams reported their positions and progress. Petra stood at the logistics hub, monitoring equipment distribution and ensuring communication channels remained clear. Dominic's squad entered Terminal 3 through the main concourse, weapons raised, moving in textbook formation. The scenario involved 12 hostile actors holding 37 civilians in the food court area. His team had 15 minutes to neutralize threats and secure hostages with 0 simulated casualties. The pressure was real, even if the bullets weren't. International observers watched from elevated positions, cameras recording every movement for later analysis. The assault went smoothly at first. Dominic's point man identified 3 hostiles positioned behind service counters, using hand signals to communicate positions to the team. They advanced in coordinated pairs, covering angles, maintaining discipline. Dominic felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the heightened awareness that came with tactical operations. This was what he lived for, what he'd trained thousands of hours to perfect. Then the scenario shifted. Exercise controllers introduced a complication: additional hostiles on the upper level with elevated firing positions. Suddenly, Dominic's team was exposed, caught in a crossfire between ground-level threats and shooters above. The simulation rounds cracked through the air, paint marking near misses on the terminal floor. "Get to cover," Dominic ordered, his team scattering behind concrete pillars and overturned tables. The situation deteriorated rapidly. Every time they attempted to advance, simulated fire drove them back. The elevated shooters had perfect angles, making forward movement nearly impossible. Dominic's frustration mounted as precious seconds ticked away. He tried flanking maneuvers, suppressive fire patterns, even a desperate rush that resulted in 3 of his team members being marked as simulated casualties by exercise referees. Over the radio, other teams reported similar difficulties. The scenarios have been designed to be challenging, pushing the assault forces to their limits. Terminal 1 had teams pinned in a stairwell. Terminal 2's hostage rescue had stalled completely. Terminal 4 was managing better, but still struggling with coordinated enemy positions. The international observers took detailed notes, watching how each nation's soldiers adapted to adversity. Petra monitored the tactical channels from the logistics hub, tracking team positions and equipment usage. She could hear the stress in the radio communications, the controlled panic as teams realized their rehearsed plans weren't working. Her fingers moved across her tablet, updating supply distributions and coordinating medical response for the simulated casualties. But part of her mind, the part that never truly shut off, was analyzing the tactical situations, seeing solutions that the assault teams couldn't from their ground-level perspectives. Dominic's voice came through the command channel, requesting sniper support. "We need elevated shooters taken out," he reported, breathing hard. "Can't advance without suppressing those positions." The exercise controller responded that sniper teams were repositioned for Terminal 1 and couldn't provide immediate support. Dominic cursed under his breath, pinned behind a concrete pillar while paint rounds impacted around his position. His squad was down to 4 effective members, the scenario timer showing 8 minutes remaining. The hostages, role players huddled in the center of the food court, were becoming restless. In a real situation, the terrorists would have started executing them by now. The pressure mounted, Dominic's confidence eroding as his tactical options narrowed. He'd never failed an exercise before, never been unable to complete a mission. The thought of failing in front of international observers made his jaw clench. Petra closed her tablet and reached for the metal case beside her workstation. "Survey equipment," the label read. She positioned it there that morning, seemingly just another piece of logistics gear among dozens of cases and containers. Her fingers traced the latches for a moment before she pulled them open. Inside, nestled in custom foam, was a rifle system that very few people in the world had ever seen. Custom-built, every component selected and modified for her specific requirements. The scope alone cost more than most soldiers made in a year. She assembled it with practiced efficiency, movements automatic after thousands of repetitions. Stock, receiver, barrel, scope, each piece locking into place with satisfying precision. The entire process took 43 seconds. She'd done it faster in combat conditions, but there was no need to rush now. Not yet. She slung the rifle across her back and moved toward the terminal access stairs, her soft-soled boots making no sound on the concrete floor. The airport's architectural plans had been part of her logistics review, every sight line and elevation point memorized during her preparation work. She knew exactly where she needed to be. The maintenance access corridor led to a service catwalk that ran above Terminal 3, used by technicians to reach lighting and ventilation systems. Petra climbed 3 flights of stairs, her breathing steady and controlled, her heart rate barely elevated despite the exertion. The catwalk provided a perfect elevated position overlooking the food court. She could see Dominic's team pinned behind cover, could see the exercise hostile actors in their elevated positions, could see the role-player hostages clustered in the center. The tactical situation was clear from this vantage point, every angle visible, every solution obvious. She unslung her rifle and settled into position, the cold metal familiar against her cheek. Below, Dominic tried another advance and was immediately driven back by a simulated fire. 6 minutes remaining. He was running out of time and options. His pride screamed at him to find a solution, to prove his tactical superiority, but the scenario parameters had him beaten. He reached for his radio to request scenario reset, the ultimate admission of failure. Then a new voice came through the tactical channel, soft and clear and utterly calm. Terminal 3 Assault Team, this is Overwatch. I have visual on all hostile positions. Stand by for fire support. Dominic froze, his fingers still on the radio, transmit button. That voice. He knew that voice. But it couldn't be. Not here. Not in this scenario. Not providing tactical Overwatch. Petra's breathing slowed, her heart rate dropping into the 50s, her body entering the state she'd trained it to achieve. The first hostile was 347 meters away, elevated position behind a glass barrier. Wind was negligible inside the terminal, temperature controlled, no environmental variables to calculate. She found her sight picture, the reticle settling naturally on the target's center mass. Between heartbeats, in that perfect moment of stillness, she pressed the trigger. The simulation round impacted precisely, the paint marker exploding across the hostile actor's chest. The exercise referee immediately signaled the kill, the hostile actor raising his hands and stepping back from the scenario. Petra was already transitioning to the second target, her movements fluid and automatic. Sight picture, breath control, trigger press. Another impact, another confirmed kill. The second hostile was marked out of the scenario. Dominic watched from behind his cover, disbelief washing over him. Those were impossible shots, threading through narrow angles in a crowded terminal environment. And that voice on the radio, coordinating the engagement with professional calm. It couldn't be Captain Lindholm. It couldn't be the quiet logistics officer who'd never seen combat. But somewhere deep in his mind, pieces were beginning to connect, memories surfacing of conversations he'd dismissed, of competence he'd refused to acknowledge. The third hostile fell to Petra's rifle, then the fourth. She worked methodically, each shot placed with surgical precision, giving Dominic's team the suppressive fire they needed. Move forward, she said quietly over the radio. Hostile positions neutralized. Advance and secure hostages. Dominic's team moved forward cautiously, still processing what had just happened. The elevated threats that had pinned them down for 8 agonizing minutes had been eliminated in less than 30 seconds by an unknown sniper. They advanced through the food court, clearing the remaining ground-level hostiles with renewed confidence. The hostages were secured, the scenario completed with 2 minutes to spare. Exercise referees signaled mission success, and Dominic's team lowered their weapons, adrenaline still coursing through their systems. "Who was that on Overwatch?" Sanderson asked, pulling off his tactical helmet. That shooting was incredible. Dominic didn't answer immediately. He was staring up at the catwalk system above the terminal, trying to spot the sniper position. The voice had been unmistakable once he'd allowed himself to recognize it. But accepting what that meant required reshaping everything he thought he understood about Captain Petra Lindholm. The exercise continued in the other terminals, teams working through their scenarios with varying degrees of success. Terminal 1's assault finally broke their stalemate with a creative breaching maneuver. Terminal 2 requested scenario reset after sustaining too many simulated casualties. Terminal 4 completed their objectives efficiently, the French Special Forces team demonstrating textbook tactical precision. The international observers compared notes, evaluating performance standards and coordination effectiveness. Petra disassembled her rifle with the same practiced efficiency she'd used to assemble it, each component returning to its foam line case. She felt the familiar post-engagement calm, the slight tremor in her hands that always came after her heart rate returned to normal. 4 targets, 4 kills, 0 margin for error in a crowded terminal environment. The shots had been technically challenging, but well within her capabilities. She'd made far more difficult shots under far worse conditions. She descended from the catwalk and returned to the logistics hub, carrying the case as if it contained nothing more interesting than survey equipment. Several personnel glanced at her as she passed, but no one questioned her. She'd been moving through the airport all morning, coordinating supplies. Her presence in any location was unremarkable. She secured the case back at her workstation and returned to her tablet, reviewing ammunition expenditure reports from the morning scenarios. Dominic's squad debriefed in a designated area near Terminal 3's main entrance. The exercise controllers praised their adaptability and successful mission completion, noting that requesting fire support had been the tactically correct decision. But Dominic barely heard the feedback. His mind was replaying that voice on the radio, soft and calm and utterly professional. Terminal 3 Assault Team, this is Overwatch. The same voice that he'd mocked for months, that he'd imitated in exaggerated whispers, that he dismissed as belonging to someone playing dress-up in a soldier's uniform. He excused himself from the debriefing and went searching. The logistics hub was his first stop. Petra stood at her workstation, surrounded by tablets and communication equipment, coordinating lunch distribution for the 500 personnel participating in the exercise. She looked exactly as she always did, composed, efficient, unremarkable. When she noticed Dominic approaching, she nodded politely. Staff Sergeant Carver, congratulations on completing your scenario successfully. That was you, he said without preamble. On the radio, providing Overwatch. Petra's expression didn't change. I assisted with tactical coordination when I observed your team was experiencing difficulties. The response was technically accurate, but revealed nothing. Dominic stepped closer, lowering his voice. Those shots, from that range, through those angles, that wasn't basic tactical coordination. That was expert-level precision shooting. Petra met his eyes, her voice as soft as ever. I have some experience with long-range systems. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to coordinate equipment distribution for the afternoon scenarios. She turned back to her tablet, dismissing him with professional courtesy. Dominic stood there for a long moment, frustration and confusion warring in his expression. He wanted to push, to demand answers, but something in her calm demeanor made him hesitate. He walked away, looking back twice, his certainty about everything beginning to crack. The afternoon scenarios introduced new complications. Exercise controllers had decided to increase difficulty based on morning performance, adding environmental challenges and reducing response times. Terminal 2's team faced a scenario with smoke simulation and limited visibility. Terminal 4 dealt with multiple hostage locations requiring simultaneous assaults. Terminal 1's team encountered a scenario where hostiles had body armor, requiring precision shot placement to achieve kills. Dominic's squad was assigned a rooftop insertion scenario in Terminal 3, rappelling from the upper parking structure to engage hostiles who had barricaded themselves in a departure lounge. The tactical complexity was significant, requiring rope work, aerial coordination, and rapid transition from rappelling to combat effectiveness. His team prepared carefully, checking equipment multiple times, reviewing the approach angles. But Dominic was distracted. He kept thinking about those morning shots, about the impossible precision and calm professionalism. He found himself watching Petra during the preparation period, observing how she moved, how she checked equipment, how she interacted with other personnel. There was no wasted motion, no uncertainty. Everything she did was efficient and purposeful. How had he never noticed that before? How had he mistaken quiet competence for weakness? The British sergeant he'd spoken with the previous day approached during equipment check. Your logistics officer, he said conversationally. Captain Lindholm, you know much about her background? Dominic shook his head. Just that she's never deployed to combat zones. Coordinates supplies, handles paperwork. The British sergeant made a thoughtful sound. Right? Paperwork. Interesting specialty for someone with her skill set. What do you mean? Dominic asked, his attention sharpening. The British sergeant seemed to choose his words carefully. Just that I've worked with a lot of logistics officers over the years. Most of them don't move like she does. Most of them don't have that kind of situational awareness. He paused, and most of them definitely can't make shots like the ones we saw this morning. Dominic felt something cold settle in his stomach. You think she's something else? Not just logistics. The British sergeant smiled slightly. I think, mate, that maybe you should ask yourself why someone with her capabilities is assigned to coordinate supplies at a forward operating base. People don't usually get those assignments unless they're recovering from something, or hiding from something, or both. He walked away, leaving Dominic standing alone with his thoughts spiraling. The rooftop scenario began at 1400 hours. Dominic's team rappelled down from the parking structure, descending on ropes with their weapons secured across their backs. The maneuver went smoothly, boots hitting the ground in coordinated sequence. They transitioned to combat positions, advancing toward the departure lounge entrance. The scenario hostiles were positioned defensively, using overturned furniture and structural columns for cover. Dominic forced himself to focus, pushing thoughts of Petra aside. His team needed him present and tactical, not distracted by mysteries about logistics officers who could shoot like trained snipers. They breached the departure lounge, engaging hostiles in a rapid firefight that tested their reaction speed and accuracy. The scenario was challenging, requiring precise shot placement to avoid simulated civilian casualties. But they were prepared, their training evident in every movement and decision. They completed the scenario in 11 minutes, all objectives achieved with minimal simulated casualties. Exercise referees declared it an exemplary performance, noting their adaptability and precision. Dominic's squad celebrated quietly, professional satisfaction replacing their earlier cockiness. They'd proved themselves against difficult scenarios. They demonstrated their capabilities. But Dominic felt hollow, the victory incomplete somehow, because he kept thinking about those morning shots, about the soft voice providing tactical coordination, about the quiet logistics officer who'd endured months of his mockery without ever defending herself or revealing what she was truly capable of. And he kept thinking about the British sergeant's words. People don't usually get those assignments unless they're recovering from something, or hiding from something, or both. Evening brought a temporary pause to the exercise scenarios. Personnel gathered in designated rest areas, comparing experiences and performance outcomes. The atmosphere was relaxed but competitive, soldiers from 8 nations swapping stories about their tactical challenges. Food service teams distributed meals, while coordination staff prepared briefing materials for the following day's scenarios. The airport hummed with activity even as sunset painted the terminals in amber light. Dominic sat with his squad in Terminal 3's converted restaurant space, picking at his meal without much appetite. Around him, his team recounted their successful scenarios with animated gestures. Sanderson was describing the rappelling insertion in exaggerated detail, making the rest of the squad laugh. But Dominic's attention kept drifting to the logistics hub visible through the terminal windows, where Petra worked under portable lighting, still coordinating supply chains. She'd been working for 14 hours straight without visible break. Dominic watched her move between workstations, consulting with other logistics personnel, checking manifests on her tablet. The same quiet efficiency he'd mistaken for timidity, the same careful attention to detail he'd dismissed as obsessive paperwork mentality. But now he saw it differently. That wasn't the behavior of someone hiding from combat. That was the behavior of someone who understood that mission success depended on every detail being perfect. The British sergeant appeared beside Dominic's table, carrying a meal tray. "Mind if I join you?" Dominic gestured to an empty chair. The sergeant sat, introducing himself properly. Sergeant Major Colin Whitmore, SAS. 23 years in service. He extended a hand, and Dominic shook it. Staff Sergeant Dominic Carver. Special Operations. 8 years. Whitmore nodded approvingly. Good work today on those scenarios. Your team's quite skilled." They ate in companionable silence for a moment before Whitmore spoke again. "So, have you figured it out yet?" Dominic set down his fork. "Figure what out?" "Who your logistics officer really is." Whitmore's tone was casual, but his eyes were sharp, watching Dominic's reaction carefully. "I know she's more than she appears," Dominic admitted. "The shooting this morning made that obvious. But I can't access her full service record. It's restricted above my clearance level." Whitmore leaned back in his chair, considering. "I can't tell you classified details, understand? But I can tell you that about 7 years ago, there was a sniper operating in Afghanistan and Iraq. Call sign Songbird. Some of the things attributed to that call sign seemed impossible. Shots at ranges that shouldn't have been survivable for the target. Hostage rescues that conventional assault couldn't achieve. High-value target eliminations that changed entire regional power structures." Dominic felt his mouth go dry. Songbird. He'd heard the name, whispered in special operations circles with a mixture of reverence and skepticism. Most people thought Songbird was a myth, a composite of multiple snipers' accomplishments attributed to one legendary figure. The reported shot distances alone seemed fantastical. No one could consistently make kills beyond 2,000 meters in combat conditions. It wasn't humanly possible. Whitmore continued, his voice quiet. Then Songbird disappeared from the field. Operational injury was the official word. Classified details need to know only. The call sign went inactive about 18 months ago. He paused meaningfully. Right around the time Captain Lindholm received her current logistics assignment. Dominic stared at him, pieces clicking into place with awful clarity. "You're saying she's Songbird?" Whitmore shrugged. "I'm saying that if I were looking for someone who could make those shots we saw this morning, I'd be interested in talking to someone with that particular call sign." He stood, picking up his tray. "But what do I know? I'm just an old sergeant who pays attention to details." He walked away, leaving Dominic sitting in stunned silence. The implications crashed over Dominic like a wave. If Petra was Songbird, if she'd operated at that level in some of the most dangerous combat zones in the world, then every comment he'd made about her never seeing combat, every joke about her hiding behind a desk, every mocking imitation of her soft voice, had been aimed at one of the most accomplished snipers in military history. The humiliation he'd inflicted on someone who'd saved countless lives with her skill and courage. The contempt he'd shown to someone who'd earned more respect than he could achieve in 10 lifetimes. He felt sick. His hands trembled slightly as he gripped the edge of the table. All those months of mockery, all those public humiliations, and she'd never once defended herself or revealed what she was. She'd simply endured it with the same quiet composure she brought to everything. Because she couldn't reveal it. Because whatever injury or circumstance had brought her to that logistics assignment was classified, protected by operational security requirements she couldn't violate even to defend her own reputation. Dominic stood abruptly, his meal forgotten. He had to know for certain. He had to confirm what Whitmore had implied. He walked toward the logistics hub, his mind racing with questions he didn't know how to ask. But as he approached, another voice stopped him. The exercise commander, a colonel named Morrison, stood near the hub entrance talking with several international observers. Dominic slowed, staying just outside their conversational range, but close enough to hear. Morrison was discussing the morning scenarios, particularly the sniper support that had rescued several stalled assault operations. "Exceptional shooting," a German observer commented. "Do we know who provided that overwatch?" Morrison smiled slightly. "That would be Captain Lindholm, one of our logistics coordination officers." The observers exchanged surprised glances. A logistics officer? With that level of precision shooting capability? Morrison's expression became carefully neutral. "Captain Lindholm has diverse qualifications. She's currently assigned to logistics coordination as part of a transitional assignment." The observers seemed to understand something in that phrasing, nodding with newfound respect. The German observer made a note on his tablet. "We would be interested in learning more about her background and training methods. Such skill sets are valuable across all military operations." "I'm sure that can be arranged," Morrison replied, "though some of her service history remains classified." He changed the subject smoothly, directing the observers toward other topics. But Dominic had heard enough. The exercise commander knew. The international observers suspected. Everyone except Dominic had understood what Petra represented. He'd been the only one blind enough, arrogant enough, to mistake her quiet nature for weakness. He retreated from the logistics hub, unable to face her yet, unable to find words adequate for the apology he owed. He walked through Terminal 3 in a daze, barely noticing the activity around him. His squad called to him from their rest area, but he waved them off, needing solitude to process the catastrophic revelation of his own stupidity and cruelty. He found himself on an observation deck overlooking the runways, the night air cool against his face. Stars stretched overhead, unobscured by the airport's lights. He thought about every interaction he'd had with Petra, seeing them all through this new lens. Her patience hadn't been weakness. Her quiet nature hadn't been timidity. She'd been a professional maintaining operational security and dignity in the face of treatment she absolutely didn't deserve. And that voice, that soft, gentle voice that he'd mocked so mercilessly, it wasn't a sign of fragility. It was the result of an injury sustained in service, in combat conditions he couldn't imagine, fighting battles he'd never be cleared to know about. Whitmore had said operational injury. Vocal cord damage would fit. Something had hurt her badly enough to end her sniper career and leave her with that distinctive soft tone. And he'd made it the centerpiece of his mockery. Below him, visible through the terminal windows, Petra continued working at the logistics hub, still coordinating, still ensuring everything would be perfect for tomorrow's scenarios. Still doing her job with the same competence and dedication she'd shown every single day despite months of his contempt. Dominic pressed his palms against the observation deck railing, shame burning in his chest like acid. Tomorrow the exercise would continue. More scenarios, more tactical challenges, more opportunities for soldiers to prove themselves. But Dominic already knew he'd failed the most important test. Not the scenarios with their simulated enemies and calculated difficulties. He'd failed the basic test of recognizing worth in another person. He'd failed to show respect to someone who'd earned it beyond any measure. And he had no idea how to even begin making that right. The second day of exercises began with renewed intensity. Exercise controllers had analyzed the previous day's performance and designed scenarios specifically to challenge each team's weaknesses. The difficulty escalated, pushing personnel to their operational limits. Terminal assignments rotated, forcing teams to adapt to unfamiliar environments. The competitive atmosphere sharpened as nations sought to demonstrate superior tactical capabilities. Dominic barely slept the previous night, lying in his assigned quarters, replaying every cruel comment, every mocking gesture, every public humiliation he'd inflicted on Petra. The weight of his realization pressed down on him like physical mass. He'd rehearsed apologies in his mind, but every formulation seemed inadequate, hollow words that couldn't undo months of systematic cruelty. How did you apologize to someone you treated with contempt when they'd survived and sacrificed more than you could comprehend? Morning briefing assembled all personnel in Terminal 1's main concourse. Colonel Morrison outlined the day's scenarios with tactical precision. Multiple simultaneous threats, reduced response times, limited ammunition supplies, civilian evacuation complications. Every parameter designed to test decision-making under maximum stress. Petra stood near the logistics coordination station, tablet in hand, monitoring equipment distribution schedules. Dominic watched her from across the concourse, seeing everything differently now. The way she held herself, the economy of her movements, the focused attention to detail. That wasn't administrative caution. That was combat discipline applied to a different battlefield. The briefing concluded, and teams dispersed to their assigned terminals. Dominic's squad received Terminal 4, a scenario involving hostage rescue from multiple aircraft simultaneously. Complex geometry, tight timelines, risk of simulated civilian casualties. His team gathered their equipment, checking weapons and communication gear with practiced efficiency. But Dominic's attention kept drifting to Petra, who was coordinating ammunition distribution across 4 terminals while managing communication frequencies and medical response positioning. Sanderson noticed his distraction. "Sarge, you okay? You've been off since yesterday evening." Dominic forced himself to focus. "I'm fine. Just thinking about the scenarios." But Sanderson wasn't convinced. "Is this about the sniper support yesterday? About Captain Lindholm? Word's spreading that she's got some serious background. Some guys are saying she might be that legendary sniper everyone talks about." Songbird. Dominic's jaw tightened. "Focus on the mission, Sanderson. Whatever her background, it doesn't change our objectives." But even as he said it, he knew that was a lie. It changed everything. It recontextualized every interaction, every assumption, every moment of mockery. Sanderson nodded and moved to check equipment, but Dominic caught him glancing back with concern. His squad could sense something was wrong with their sergeant, even if they didn't understand what. The Terminal 4 scenario initiated at 0000 hours. 3 commercial aircraft positioned on the tarmac, hostile actors holding passengers inside each plane, demands being transmitted through scenario communications. Dominic's team had to coordinate simultaneous assaults on all 3 aircraft, neutralize threats, and secure hostages within a 12-minute window. The tactical complexity was staggering, requiring perfect timing and flawless execution. They split into 3 elements, approaching the aircraft from designated angles. Dominic led the team on the largest plane, a wide-body jet with over 200 role-player passengers. They breached through emergency exits, moving through the narrow aisles with weapons ready. The confined space made every movement challenging, every angle dangerous. Hostile actors engaged them immediately, simulation rounds filling the aircraft interior with paint markers. The scenario went badly from the start. The hostiles had defensive positions that made approach nearly impossible without sustaining heavy, simulated casualties. Dominic's team adapted, using flashbangs and smoke to create confusion, but the clock was running. 8 minutes remaining. 6 minutes. 4. They were falling behind, unable to clear the aircraft fast enough while avoiding civilian casualties. Dominic felt frustration building, his tactical options narrowing with each passing second. Then complications multiplied. Exercise controllers introduced a new element. One of the hostiles had acquired a simulated explosive device. The threat level escalated instantly. Dominic's team had to identify and neutralize the bomber without triggering detonation, all while continuing to clear hostile positions and protect hostages. The scenario had become nearly impossible, designed specifically to create failure conditions and test response to overwhelming odds. Dominic's radio crackled with the soft voice he now recognized with painful clarity. "Terminal 4 Assault Leader, this is coordination. I'm monitoring your scenario parameters. The bomber is positioned in row 17, port side. Hostiles are concentrated in forward cabin and aft galley. Recommend concentrated assault on forward position, while secondary element neutralizes bomber from starboard approach." Petra's voice carried absolute certainty, tactical analysis delivered with calm precision. But Dominic hesitated. He'd spent months dismissing her input, questioning her tactical judgment, suggesting she didn't understand real combat operations. Now, faced with her guidance during a critical scenario moment, his instinct was still resistance. His pride screamed at him to find his own solution, to prove he didn't need help from the logistics officer he'd spent so long demeaning. The pause stretched for 3 seconds, for precious time wasting while he wrestled with his own ego. Understood coordination, he finally forced himself to say, "Executing recommended approach." He split his team as Petra had suggested, sending his best shooters forward while he personally led the element toward row 17. The tactical adjustment worked immediately. The forward assault drew hostile attention, creating opportunity for Dominic to approach the bomber position from an unexpected angle. He neutralized the simulated threat with 2 precise shots, exercise referees confirming successful bomber elimination with 90 seconds remaining on the scenario clock. The forward team completed their assault, hostiles neutralized, hostages secured. The other two aircraft teams reported successful scenario completion within acceptable parameters. Terminal 4 mission accomplished, though with significantly higher simulated casualties than Command preferred. Exercise referees noted the successful tactical adaptation mid-scenario, but criticized the delayed response to coordination guidance. Dominic accepted the feedback with wooden acknowledgement, knowing they were right. His hesitation had nearly cost them the scenario. His squad gathered after scenario debrief, discussing performance and areas for improvement. Several team members mentioned the coordination guidance that had saved the mission, expressing gratitude for the tactical support. "That logistics officer really knows her stuff," one soldier commented. "Wonder where she learned to read tactical situations that clearly." Dominic said nothing, unable to contribute without revealing the shame that consumed him. He found himself walking toward the logistics hub during the midday break, drawn by the need to finally confront what he'd done. Petra stood at her workstation, reviewing scenario performance data and adjusting supply allocations for afternoon operations. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes testimony to the continuous 30-hour work period she'd maintained. But her hands remained steady on the tablet, her focus undiminished by fatigue. Dominic approached slowly, each step requiring conscious effort. She noticed him when he was 5 meters away, looking up from her work with the same neutral, professional expression she'd maintained through months of his abuse. "Staff Sergeant Carver, do you need something?" Her tone carried no hostility, no satisfaction at having proved her capability, no acknowledgement of the power dynamic shift. Just the same quiet courtesy she'd always shown him. The words he'd rehearsed dissolved in his throat. Standing before her, seeing the evidence of her tireless professionalism, remembering the precision of her shooting and the calm certainty of her tactical guidance, every prepared apology seemed pathetically insufficient. "I want to do," he began, then stopped. His voice sounded harsh even to his own ears, so different from her gentle tone. "You tried again. Yesterday morning. That shooting. That was incredible work." Petra's expression didn't change. "Thank you. I was glad I could assist." She started to turn back to her tablet, dismissing the conversation as complete. But Dominic couldn't let it end there. "Wait," he said, more urgently than he intended. "I need to know. Are you—" He hesitated, uncertain how to phrase it. "Are you Songbird?" The question hung between them. For a moment, Petra's professional mask slipped, something complex flickering across her features. Pain, perhaps, or weariness, or resignation. Then it was gone, replaced by careful neutrality. "I'm Captain Petra Lindholm, Logistics Coordination Officer. That's all you need to know for operational purposes." It wasn't confirmation, but it wasn't denial either. It was exactly what someone bound by operational security restrictions would say. Dominic felt the weight of all his accumulated cruelty pressing down on him. The mockery of her voice, when that voice might have been damaged protecting people he'd never know about. The contempt for her lack of combat experience, when she'd operated at levels of lethality and precision he couldn't imagine. The public humiliations, the constant undermining, all directed at someone who'd earned more respect than he could ever deserve. "I'm sorry," he said, the words inadequate but genuine. "I'm so sorry for how I've treated you." Petra looked at him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then she nodded once. "Apology acknowledged, Staff Sergeant. Now if you'll excuse me, I have work to complete before afternoon scenarios begin." She turned back to her tablet, ending the conversation with the same quiet professionalism she brought to everything. Dominic stood there for several seconds longer, then walked away, the hollow feeling in his chest unchanged by his insufficient apology. Afternoon scenarios pushed every team to breaking points. Exercise controllers had refined their approach, identifying each unit's vulnerabilities and exploiting them systematically. Terminal 2 faced scenarios with malfunctioning communications equipment. Terminal 1 dealt with simulated chemical contamination requiring protective gear that limited mobility and visibility. Terminal 3's teams confronted scenarios where hostiles had access to simulated heavy weapons. The training environment had transformed from challenging to deliberately brutal. Dominic's squad received assignment to Terminal 1 for a late afternoon scenario involving a mass casualty event with active shooters in a multi-level parking structure. The tactical nightmare combined environmental complications with time pressure and force engagement rules that required split-second judgment calls. His team prepared methodically, but tension showed in their movements. Everyone felt the weight of escalating difficulty, the awareness that these scenarios were designed to create failure and test response to overwhelming circumstances. Petra coordinated the complex logistics from her hub, managing ammunition resupply, medical response positioning, and communication backup systems across all 4 terminals. She'd been awake for 34 hours straight, subsisting on coffee and brief moments of rest between scenario waves. Other logistics personnel had rotated shifts, but Petra remained constant, refusing to delegate the central coordination role. Her voice came through tactical channels regularly, providing updates and guidance with the same steady calm, regardless of scenario chaos or fatigue. The parking structure scenario began at 1500 hours. Dominic's team entered from the ground level, immediately engaging hostile actors positioned behind vehicles and concrete pillars. The enclosed space created echo effects that made determining shot origin nearly impossible. Simulation rounds cracked through the structure, paint markers splattering across concrete and metal. The team advanced floor by floor, clearing hostile positions while searching for simulated casualties requiring evacuation. The scenario complexity multiplied when exercise controllers introduced a structural instability element. Simulated damage from explosive devices created collapse zones that teams had to navigate while maintaining tactical effectiveness. Dominic's squad adapted, using alternative routes and supporting each other through dangerous areas. But the hostile count kept increasing, role players appearing from unexpected positions, maintaining constant pressure that prevented systematic clearing operations. 7 minutes into the scenario, Dominic's point man took simulated hits that marked him as a casualty. 2 more team members went down seconds later. The scenario was collapsing, hostile fire concentrating from elevated positions that Dominic's remaining team members couldn't effectively engage. They retreated to a concrete column cluster, pinned down and running out of tactical options. The exercise referees watched impassively, documenting every failure point for later analysis. Terminal 1 assault team. Petra's voice came through the radio, soft but absolutely clear. You have hostile positions on levels 3 and 4 providing overlapping fields of fire. Current location leave you exposed to enfilade fire from your left flank. Recommend immediate displacement to Sector Charlie, where structural elements provide better protection. Dominic acknowledged, ordering his team to move. They bounded to the new position, immediately gaining better cover and sight lines. But the scenario wasn't finished punishing them. Exercise controllers introduced a new complication. Civilian role players panicking and running through the line of fire. Dominic's team had to hold fire while civilians crossed their engagement zones, giving hostile actors opportunity to advance and improve their positions. The tactical situation deteriorated further. For minutes remaining on the scenario clock, multiple objectives incomplete, hostile forces maintaining superior positioning. You need to break their observation advantage, Petra's voice suggested. I'm tracking hostile positions through scenario monitoring systems. If you create suppressive fire on Level 3, Section Bravo, I can guide your flanking element through Level 2 to achieve surprise assault on their primary position. Her tactical analysis was precise, identifying solutions that Dominic couldn't see from his ground-level perspective. But implementing her suggestion required trust, required accepting guidance from the person he'd spent months dismissing as tactically incompetent. He made the decision in under 2 seconds this time. Roger, coordination. Executing flanking maneuver. He split his reduced team, 3 soldiers providing suppressive fire while he led 2 others through Level 2's vehicle choke corridors. Petra guided them turn by turn, her voice providing navigation updates that brought them to perfect assault position behind the primary hostile grouping. They breached with coordinated precision, neutralizing 5 hostile actors in rapid succession. The scenario momentum shifted instantly. With the primary position eliminated, Dominic's team completed their remaining objectives in the final 90 seconds. Casualties evacuated, remaining hostiles cleared, scenario success achieved despite the catastrophic start. Exercise referees noted the exceptional tactical recovery and praised the coordination between ground team and logistics support. But Dominic barely heard the positive feedback. He was too focused on the realization that Petra had saved his team twice now, providing tactical guidance that demonstrated combat awareness far exceeding his own. The scenario debrief revealed the extent of the challenge. Terminal 1's parking structure mission had the highest difficulty rating of any scenario conducted during the exercise. Only 2 of 5 assigned teams had achieved successful completion. Dominic's squad was one of them, primarily because of Petra's real-time tactical coordination. The international observers specifically noted the exceptional quality of the logistics support in their evaluation reports. Dominic dismissed his squad and went looking for Petra again. He found her in a quiet corner of Terminal 1, sitting on an equipment crate with her tablet balanced on her knees. She looked utterly exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed from lack of sleep, her hands trembling slightly from accumulated fatigue. But she was still working, reviewing scenario after-action reports and preparing logistics plans for the following day's operations. He approached carefully, unsure of his reception. "You should rest," he said quietly. "You've been awake for, what, 36 hours? Petra looked up, her expression distant with exhaustion. 34 hours and 42 minutes, she corrected automatically. "And I'll rest when the logistics planning is complete." The soldiers operating tomorrow deserve the same quality preparation as those who operated today. Her dedication was absolute, even at the edge of collapse. Dominic sat on a nearby crate without asking permission, needing to finally say what had been building in him since the previous evening's revelation. "You saved my team today. Twice. You saved multiple teams yesterday. You've been providing tactical coordination at a level that most operations centers can't match, and you've been doing it while managing the entire logistics apparatus for a 500-person multinational exercise." He paused, searching for words. "I don't know how to adequately express how wrong I was about you. About everything." Petra was quiet for a long moment, still looking at her tablet screen. Then she spoke, her soft voice carrying a weight that made Dominic's chest tighten. "You weren't wrong about everything, Staff Sergeant. I am a logistics officer. I do coordinate supplies and manage paperwork. That's my current assignment, and I execute it to the best of my ability." Her eyes lifted to meet his. "The fact that I have other skills, other experience, doesn't make that assignment less important or less worthy of respect." The rebuke was gentle but devastating. She wasn't just talking about him underestimating her combat capabilities. She was calling out his entire attitude toward logistics personnel, his contempt for support roles, his belief that only direct combat operations deserved respect. He'd been wrong on every level, and she was making him understand exactly how wrong. "I know," he said quietly. "I understand that now. I'm sorry isn't adequate, but I don't know what else to say." Petra returned her attention to the tablet. "You can start by treating the logistics personnel you work with as professionals doing essential work. You can recognize that military operations require numerous specialties, all of which contribute to mission success. You can stop measuring worth exclusively through combat credentials and start appreciating competence wherever you find it." She glanced at him again. "That would be a start." Dominic nodded, accepting the criticism he absolutely deserved. Then he asked the question that had been eating at him. "Your voice, the way you speak, is that from," he hesitated, "from whatever happened, whatever injury brought you to this assignment?" Petra's hand moved unconsciously to her throat, fingers touching the skin there, as if remembering pain. "That's classified information that I can't discuss," she said carefully. "But vocal cord damage can result from various operational circumstances." The confirmation was implicit. Something had happened to her in combat, something serious enough to permanently damage her voice and end her sniper career. and he'd made that injury the centerpiece of his mockery for months. The shame burned fresh, and Dominic found himself unable to speak. Petra seemed to sense his reaction. "You didn't know," she said quietly. "No one here knows. That was intentional. Operational security exists for reasons. You're not responsible for information you weren't clear to access. But I'm responsible for how I treated you," Dominic countered. "Regardless of what I knew or didn't know, I should have shown basic respect. Instead, I was cruel." He stood, needing to move, to do something with the energy of his self-recrimination. "How do you not hate me? How have you maintained professionalism in the face of months of systematic harassment?" Petra closed her tablet and looked at him with an expression that mixed exhaustion with something that might have been compassion. "Because carrying hatred is exhausting, Staff Sergeant. I've seen enough violence and cruelty in combat zones to understand that most people aren't malicious, just ignorant or scared or trying to prove something to themselves. You needed to feel superior, to establish hierarchy, to validate your worth by diminishing mine. That's human nature, not personal evil." She stood slowly, swaying slightly with fatigue. "I forgive you, Dominic. Not because you've earned it, but because I'm tired of carrying the weight of your contempt." The use of his first name, delivered in that soft, damaged voice, nearly broke him. He watched her walk away toward the logistics hub, carrying her tablet and the weight of 34 hours of continuous work. And he understood that despite everything, despite the revelation of her legendary capabilities and his catastrophic misjudgment, she was still just doing her job, still ensuring that every soldier, including him, had everything they needed to succeed. That was who she was. Not Songbird, the legendary sniper. Captain Petra Lindholm, professional soldier, doing essential work with quiet competence and dignity he would spend years trying to match. The third morning arrived with unexpected chaos. At 05:30 hours, 45 minutes before scheduled scenario resumption, exercise communications intercepted fragmentary intelligence, suggesting actual hostile activity near the airport perimeter. The distinction between training scenario and genuine threat became critically uncertain. Colonel Morrison activated emergency protocols, placing all personnel on heightened alert while intelligence assets attempted to verify the information. Petra had finally gone to rest 3 hours earlier, collapsing into her assigned quarters with her boots still on. But the alert brought her instantly awake, muscle memory from years of combat operations overriding exhaustion. She was at the logistics hub within 4 minutes, pulling up security feeds and coordinating with airport security personnel to track the developing situation. Her hands were steady despite the fatigue and adrenaline, her voice calm over communication channels as she organized rapid equipment redistribution. Dominic's squad assembled in full tactical gear, live ammunition replacing simulation rounds. The transition from training to potential real-world engagement happened with practice speed. Every soldier felt the shift, the weight of actual consequence replacing exercise parameters. Radio chatter increased in volume and urgency as teams positioned throughout the airport prepared for unknown threats. The international observers were evacuated to secure areas, the collaborative training atmosphere evaporating into operational tension. Intelligence reports clarified gradually over the next 20 minutes. A terrorist cell had been monitoring the exercise, planning to exploit the military presence and relax security protocols. Initial intercepts suggested they intended to target one of the terminals, using the confusion of exercise activities as cover. Exact numbers unknown. Weapons capabilities uncertain. Locations unconfirmed. The tactical picture was fragmentary and evolving, exactly the kind of situation that turned operations into chaos. Colonel Morrison established a joint operations center in Terminal 2, pulling together team leaders from all participating nations. The exercise command structure adapted into genuine tactical coordination, decades of training and doctrine aligning different military forces toward common defensive objectives. Dominic found himself in briefing sessions with German, British, French, and Israeli special operations personnel, everyone sharing intelligence and coordinating response plans. The professional competence was impressive, but the underlying tension was palpable. Petra coordinated logistics support that transformed from exercise management to combat operations within minutes. Live ammunition distribution, medical trauma teams positioning, evacuation route clearance, civilian security coordination with airport personnel. The complexity multiplied exponentially, but her systems held. Every team received exactly what they needed exactly when they needed it. Her voice came through command channels providing updates. The same soft tone, now directing actual defensive operations instead of training scenarios. At 0:17 hours, airport security cameras captured suspicious activity near Terminal 3's lower-level cargo access. For individuals moving with tactical awareness, carrying large bags, avoiding main surveillance coverage, security personnel attempted to intercept, but the individuals disappeared into maintenance corridors that connected to the terminal's internal infrastructure. Colonel Morrison made the call. Real threat, active response authorized. Terminal 3 was locked down, civilian airport workers evacuated, assault teams deployed. Dominic's squad was positioned closest to Terminal 3. They received orders to secure the upper concourse and prevent hostile movement toward civilian areas while specialized teams cleared the maintenance level. His team moved quickly, establishing defensive positions that controlled access points. The terminal felt different now, shadows potentially hiding actual enemies instead of role players. Every corner required genuine tactical caution, every doorway a potential ambush point. This was real. People could actually die. Intelligence updates continued. The terror cell was confirmed as 6 individuals, possibly more. They had accessed Terminal 3's maintenance infrastructure and were moving through areas not covered by standard surveillance. Their objective remained unclear, but the presence of large bags suggested either explosives or heavy weapons. The tactical situation was deteriorating. Hostile forces with unknown capabilities operating in complex terrain, while hundreds of military personnel tried to coordinate response without creating friendly fire incidents. Petra monitored the developing situation from the operations center, tracking team positions on digital displays while managing equipment and communication systems. She'd been awake for nearly 40 hours, but her focus never wavered. She watched the surveillance feeds showing Dominic's team holding the upper concourse, watched other teams moving through Terminal 3's lower levels, watched security personnel evacuating the last civilian workers. And she watched the maintenance corridor cameras, seeing something that made her blood run cold. The terrorists weren't trying to escape. They were positioning themselves for something bigger. She traced their movement patterns through the corridor system, recognizing tactical behavior that spoke of military training. They were establishing overlapping fields of fire in areas where assault teams would be channeled into kill zones. This wasn't amateur terrorism. These were trained fighters setting up an ambush designed to inflict maximum casualties on responding forces. She reached for the command channel, her soft voice cutting through the tactical chatter. Operations Center, this is Lindholm. I'm observing hostile movement patterns that indicate advanced tactical training. They're not evacuating. They're preparing a coordinated ambush in corridor sections Charlie through Echo. Current assault team approach vectors will place them directly into prepared kill zones. She highlighted the relevant areas on digital maps, transmitting the tactical analysis to all team leaders simultaneously. Colonel Morrison absorbed the information instantly. All teams hold positions. Do not advance into highlighted corridors. Lindholm, can you confirm hostile positions? Petra studied the camera feeds, her snipers' eye identifying details that trained observers missed. 6 confirmed hostiles. 3 with what appeared to be automatic weapons. 2 carrying large packs that could be explosives. 1 appears to be coordinating movements via radio or hand signals. They're positioned in corridor sections Charlie 4, Delta 2, and Echo 6. The tactical problem became clear. The terrorists had chosen their positions brilliantly, areas where conventional assault would be suicidal. The corridor geometry created perfect ambush conditions, and the terrorist had firepower advantage in enclosed spaces. Standard breaching tactics would result in multiple casualties before the threats could be neutralized. Special operations teams began calculating alternative approaches, but every option involved unacceptable risk or time delays that might allow terrorists to adapt or detonate explosives. Dominic listened to the tactical discussion through his radio, positioned with his squad on the upper concourse, while the real problem developed 2 levels below. He felt helpless, unable to contribute to solving the impossible tactical equation. Then Petra's voice came through again, and he recognized something in her tone. Not stress, not fear, but the absolute calm of someone who'd identified a solution that others hadn't seen yet. I have sight lines to hostile positions from the maintenance catwalk system, she said quietly. The same catwalks I used during exercise scenarios. Structural elements provide covered approach and elevated angles that negate their ambush advantage. If I can access that system, I can provide precision fire support that will allow assault teams to advance with minimal risk. The proposal hung in the radio silence, everyone processing what she was suggesting. Colonel Morrison responded immediately. Captain Lindholm, your logistics coordination. We have designated marksmen for tactical shooting. Petra's response was patient but firm. With respect, sir, those marksmen are positioned incorrectly for the required shots, and repositioning them will take 12 to 15 minutes. I'm already in Terminal 3. I know the catwalk access points, and I have the necessary equipment. I can be in position in 4 minutes. The hostile forces are still setting up. If we wait, they'll be fully prepared, and casualty risk increases exponentially. Dominic found himself holding his breath. He knew what she was really saying, what she was offering. Not logistics coordination providing tactical support. Songbird coming out of operational retirement for one more mission because the tactical situation demanded her specific skill set. He waited for Morrison's response, wondering if the colonel would authorize deploying someone who was officially just a logistics officer into actual combat engagement. The radio crackled. Captain Lindholm, you're authorized for precision fire support. Assault teams will stage at designated positions and await your signal. Coordinate directly with team leaders for optimal engagement timing. And Lindholm, Morrison's voice carried weight. Good hunting. Petra's response was simple. Understood, sir. Moving to position now. Dominic watched through the terminal windows as Petra emerged from the operations center carrying the metal case marked survey equipment. She moved quickly but efficiently, heading toward the maintenance access stairs with the purposeful stride of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. This was who she really was beneath the logistics officer assignment. This was Songbird, legendary sniper, moving into position to do what she'd always done best. Protect her people through impossible precision at impossible distances under impossible circumstances. Petra climbed the maintenance access stairs with measured pace, conserving energy for what would come next. Her heart rate remained steady at 62 beats per minute, trained physiology refusing to spike even with adrenaline flooding her system. The rifle case felt familiar in her hand, the weight distribution exactly what her muscles remembered from thousands of hours of training and operations. She thought those days were behind her, thought the injury had ended this part of her life. But circumstances had a way of requiring exactly what you thought you'd left behind. The catwalk system stretched through Terminal 3's upper infrastructure, metal walkways suspended above the public spaces for maintenance access to electrical and ventilation systems. She'd mapped these routes during her logistics preparation, noting sight lines and elevation advantages out of professional habit that apparently hadn't died with her sniper career. Now that preparation would save lives. She reached her chosen position, a junction point that provided overlapping views of the maintenance corridors where the terrorists had positioned themselves. She assembled her rifle with the efficiency of muscle memory, each component clicking into place with satisfying precision. Stock, receiver, barrel, scope. The process took 38 seconds, slightly slower than her training standard, but acceptable given 40 hours without sleep and the permanent damage to her fine motor control from the injury. She settled into shooting position, legs spread for stability, rifle supported on the catwalk railing, body finding the perfect balance point that would allow hour-long holds without tremor. The scope brought the maintenance corridor intersections into crystal clarity. She could see all 6 hostile targets through the complex geometry of doorways and structural elements. 3 with automatic weapons, exactly as she'd reported. 2 with large packs that she now confirmed contained explosive devices based on wire configurations visible during their setup activities. 1 coordinator with radio equipment, directing the others into optimal ambush positions. They were good, professionally trained, working with the kind of tactical awareness that came from military or paramilitary backgrounds. All positions, this is Songbird, she transmitted over the tactical channel, using her call sign for the first time in 18 months. Her voice remained soft, but something had changed in it. The administrative courtesy was gone, replaced by operational precision. I have eyes on all 6 hostile targets. Confirm you're receiving my video feed. She'd activated her scope camera, transmitting real-time imagery to the operations center. Colonel Morrison's voice came back immediately. Feed confirmed, Songbird. We see all targets. What's your assessment? Petra studied the targets through her scope, analyzing distance, angles, timing requirements. Targets are positioned in prepared ambush configuration. Ranges from my position, 340 meters to nearest target, 470 to furthest. All shots are technically feasible, but timing will be critical. If I engage the coordinator first, the others may scatter or detonate explosives. If I engage weapons bearers first, coordinator may trigger remote detonation. Recommend simultaneous assault coordination where I neutralize coordinator and explosives handlers while assault teams breach and engage weapons bearers. The silence on the channel lasted 3 seconds while tactical minds processed the proposal. She was suggesting engaging 3 targets in rapid succession, threading shots through complex geometry at ranges that would challenge most marksmen even under ideal conditions, while coordinated assault teams moved simultaneously. The precision requirements were extreme, the timing margins razor-thin. 1 miscalculation would result in detonated explosives or terrorist fighters unleashing automatic weapons fire on responding forces. Sergeant Major Whitmore's voice came through, his British accent unmistakable. Songbird, this is Whitmore. For the assault coordination you're describing, what's your confidence level in a shot sequence? Petra didn't hesitate. 97%. The 3% uncertainty accounts for potential target movement during engagement sequence. If targets remain stationary, confidence approaches absolute. She'd made harder shots under worse conditions. Kandahar Province, wind gusting to 20 miles per hour, target at 1,680 meters. This was technically easier despite the requirement for rapid, sequential engagement. Colonel Morrison made the call. All assault teams, prepare for coordinated breach on Songbird's mark. Weapons bearers are your primary targets once coordinator and explosives handlers are neutralized. Songbird, you have tactical command for engagement timing. Execute when ready. Petra felt the familiar calm settle over her, the state where everything except the shot disappeared. Breathing slowed, heart rate dropped to 58. Visual focus narrowed to the scope's field of view. The world reduced to target, distance, timing, and the absolute certainty of her capability. Stand by, she transmitted, engaging in 30 seconds. She counted down internally, watching the targets through her scope, waiting for the moment when all 3 priority targets would be stationary simultaneously. The coordinator moved, checking positions via hand signals. One of the explosives handlers adjusted his pack. She waited with infinite patience, learned through operations where lives depended on the perfect moment. 20 seconds. 15. The coordinator settled into position, hand reaching for his radio. 10 seconds. Both explosives handlers stopped moving, focused on their devices. 5 seconds. Engaging now, she transmitted. First shot, coordinator, 423 meters, slight left or right angle. Her finger pressed the trigger with exactly 3.2 pounds of pressure, firing mechanism releasing the round with precision that justified the rifle's six-figure cost. The bullet traveled through terminal air at 2,800 feet per second, crossing the distance in 0.47 seconds. Impact center mass, coordinator dropping instantly. She was already transitioning to the second target before the first body hit the ground. Second shot, explosives handler alpha, corridor Charlie 4, 340 meters. Trigger press, recoil absorption, impact confirmation. Target neutralized. Transition. Third shot, explosives handler beta, corridor Echo 6, 470 meters through a doorway angle that left only 18 inches of target visible. This was the difficult shot, the one that separated trained marksmen from legendary snipers. She found her sight picture in the narrow window, compensated for the additional distance, pressed the trigger with the same perfect 3.2 pounds. The round threaded through the doorway, opening and impacted precisely. 3 targets down in 4.6 seconds, exactly as she'd planned. Assault teams, breach now, she transmitted, her voice still carrying that supernatural calm. Coordinator and explosives handlers neutralized. Weapons bearers are yours. She maintained her position, scope tracking the remaining 3 terrorists as assault teams crashed through corridor doors with explosive precision. The remaining terrorists tried to respond, automatic weapons rising, but the assault teams were already inside their reaction cycle. Flashbangs detonated, creating disorientation. Precision shots from multiple angles neutralized threats before they could effectively engage. The entire operation lasted 11 seconds from Petra's first shot to final target neutralization. 0 friendly casualties. All hostile threats eliminated. Explosive devices secured without detonation. Textbook special operations execution enabled by Songbird's impossible marksmanship. Terminal 3 secured. Colonel Morrison transmitted. All teams report status. The responses came back quickly. 0 casualties. All objectives achieved. Terrorist cell completely neutralized. The operations center erupted in controlled celebration. Professional soldiers acknowledging exceptional performance while maintaining operational discipline. Morrison's voice came through specifically for Petra. Songbird, outstanding work. Return to operations center for debrief. Petra disassembled her rifle with the same efficiency she'd assembled it, each component returning to foam-lined case positions. Her hands trembled slightly now, post-engagement adrenaline finally manifesting. She sat on the catwalk for 30 seconds, allowing her body to process the chemical cascade, breathing deeply and deliberately. 41 hours without sleep, 3 combat shots under actual engagement conditions, and the weight of proving that her injury hadn't destroyed the capability that defined her professional identity. She felt exhausted and exhilarated simultaneously, emotions she'd thought she'd left behind. She descended the stairs carefully, equipment case in hand, returning to a world that now knew exactly who she was. No more hiding behind logistics officer duties. No more pretending the injury had ended her operational relevance. Songbird had returned, even if only for 11 seconds, and everyone had witnessed the legend operating at full capability. The catwalk junction where she'd position herself would be analyzed, her shot sequence studied, her tactical decisions examined by special operations personnel from 8 nations. She'd wanted anonymity, wanted to serve quietly in administrative roles while recovering. That option had just evaporated. Dominic watched from the upper concourse as Petra emerged from the maintenance access corridor. She looked small carrying that rifle case, tired beyond measure, but she moved with the confidence of someone who'd just executed a perfect operation under impossible conditions. Other soldiers were watching too, word spreading through terminal spaces about what had happened. The quiet logistics officer with the soft voice had just taken 3 impossible shots and enabled a flawless terrorist cell neutralization. Songbird wasn't just legend. She was real, she was here, and she'd just proved every whispered story about her capabilities. Petra walked past Dominic without acknowledging him, heading toward the operations center. He didn't call out, didn't try to stop her. What could he possibly say? Congratulations on being exactly what I should have recognized months ago. Sorry for mocking the combat-damaged voice that belonged to one of the most lethal precision shooters in military history. He simply watched her go, understanding that something fundamental had shifted, not just in how others would treat her, but in his own understanding of strength, capability, and what it meant to truly serve with honor and excellence. The operations center had transformed into something between command post and celebration space. International observers crowded around tactical displays, reviewing footage of the engagement with professional appreciation. Special operations personnel from 8 nations discussed the shot sequence with animated gestures, analyzing angles and timing with the enthusiasm of students witnessing a masterclass. Colonel Morrison coordinated with airport security and intelligence assets, ensuring the terrorist cell support network was thoroughly investigated. The exercise had become real-world operations and back again, leaving everyone slightly disoriented but energized. Petra sat in a quiet corner, finally allowing exhaustion to show. She'd submitted her after-action report with typical precision, documenting every tactical decision and shot parameter for later analysis. The rifle case rested beside her chair, no longer disguised as survey equipment. Everyone knew now. The logistics officer with the soft voice was Songbird, legendary sniper, holder of records that most marksmen considered impossible. Her operational security was completely compromised, but circumstances had required the revelation. Some things mattered more than maintaining cover. Dominic entered the operations center looking for her, navigating through clusters of discussing personnel. He found her in that corner, eyes closed, head resting against the wall behind her chair. She looked utterly spent, 42 hours of continuous duty culminating in 3 precision shots under actual combat conditions. But even in exhaustion, she maintained that quiet dignity he'd mistaken for weakness. He approached slowly, unsure of his welcome, but needing to speak. She opened her eyes as he neared, her expression neutral. Staff Sergeant Carver. Her voice carried the familiar soft tone, but he heard it differently now. Not weakness or fragility, but the permanent reminder of sacrifice made in service he couldn't fully comprehend. He gestured to an empty chair nearby. "May I?" She nodded once, and he sat, searching for words adequate to the moment. "That was the most incredible shooting I've ever witnessed," he began. "The tactical analysis, the shot execution, the coordination with assault teams. You saved lives today, probably dozens of lives." Petra accepted the compliment with a slight nod, but said nothing. Dominic continued, needing to express what had been building in him since watching her disappear into the maintenance access corridor. "I spent months mocking you, questioning your courage, your competence, your right to wear the uniform. And you were carrying achievements I can't even imagine. You've done things I'll never be capable of. And I treated you with contempt." Petra was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her soft voice cutting through the operations center noise. "You treated me as you saw me, Dominic. A logistics officer with no combat deployments and a voice that didn't fit your expectations of military bearing. You weren't completely wrong. I'm those things. The fact that I'm also Songbird doesn't erase that I currently serve in logistics coordination. Both identities are valid." The gentle rebuke reminded him that she'd never needed the legendary status to deserve respect. Basic professional courtesy should have been automatic regardless of her background. "But I should have known," he insisted. "Should have recognized what you were." Petra shook her head slightly. "No one was supposed to recognize what I was. That was the entire purpose of the assignment. I needed time to recover, to adapt to limitations the injury created, to figure out whether I still had operational value beyond my previous capabilities. The logistics role was supposed to be temporary cover." She glanced at the rifle case beside her chair. "I suppose that cover is thoroughly blown now." Sergeant Major Whitmore appeared, approaching with 2 cups of coffee. He offered one to Petra, who accepted gratefully. "Songbird," he said, using her call sign with obvious respect. "I've been in special operations for 23 years. I've worked with some of the finest marksmen in the world. What you did today was beyond exceptional. Those shots, that timing, that tactical command presence. You haven't lost a thing to that injury. You're still operating at the absolute peak of the profession. Petra sipped her coffee, considering his words. Thank you, Sergeant Major. But the injury did take something. Stamina, primarily. I could still make the shots, but extended operations would destroy me. 2 hours in position, and my hands start trembling uncontrollably. The vocal damage is just the visible part. There's nerve damage throughout my upper body that affects endurance and recovery. She smiled slightly, without humor. I'm excellent in short engagements, but I can't deploy for sustained operations anymore. That's why I'm in logistics coordination. Colonel Morrison joined their group, carrying a tablet with official documents. Captain Lindholm, I need to discuss your status. Your operational security is completely compromised. Your capabilities are now documented across international military channels, and frankly, keeping you in logistics coordination seems like criminal waste of talent. He paused. I'm recommending you for specialized training and advisory role. You'd work with sniper programs across allied nations, teaching precision shooting techniques and tactical coordination. Limited field deployment, mostly instructional and planning roles. Your experience and capability are too valuable to hide behind supply manifests. Petra absorbed the proposal, emotions playing across her exhausted features. Sir, I appreciate the recommendation, but I need to ask, is this because of today's performance, or is it because maintaining my cover has become impossible? Morrison smiled. Both, Captain. You proved today that you still have operational value despite your limitations. But you also made it impossible to pretend you're just a logistics officer. Every intelligence service monitoring this exercise now knows exactly who you are. Your cover identity is burned completely. We need to find you a role that utilizes your capabilities while acknowledging your limitations. I'd like some time to consider, Petra said carefully. Morrison nodded. You've earned it. Take a week of leave, rest, recover from this marathon. Then we'll discuss your future officially. He walked away, leaving Petra sitting with her coffee and her thoughts. Whitmore excused himself as well, leaving Dominic alone with her again. The operations center continued buzzing with activity around them, but their corner felt isolated, quiet space in organized chaos. Dominic struggled to find the right words. For what it's worth, he said finally, I think you'd be exceptional in that training role. You have knowledge and experience that could save countless lives if shared with the next generation of snipers. And you wouldn't have to hide who you are anymore. Wouldn't have to endure people like me treating you as less than you deserve. Petra looked at him, her expression softer than he'd ever seen it. People like you aren't the problem, Dominic. Hierarchy and respect issues exist in every organization. You just happen to be my particular example. But you also changed. You recognized your error, you apologized, and you've been trying to make amends. That matters more than the initial failure. The forgiveness felt undeserved, but Dominic accepted it with gratitude. His squad appeared at the operations center in trance, looking for him. They spotted Petra and approached with obvious respect, several soldiers addressing her directly. Ma'am, that shooting today was incredible. Thank you for keeping us safe. Petra acknowledged their comments with quiet courtesy, clearly uncomfortable with the attention, but handling it professionally. Dominic's squad had transformed from participants in his mockery to genuine admirers in the space of 3 days. As his squad moved away, Sanderson lingered. Sarge, he said quietly to Dominic, I need to apologize. I joined in when you mocked Captain Lindholm, made jokes about her voice, questioned her capabilities. I feel sick about it now, knowing who she is and what she's accomplished. Dominic put a hand on his shoulder. We all participated. We all owe her apologies and better behavior going forward. The important thing is learning from it and treating people with respect regardless of their apparent status or role. The operations center gradually emptied as personnel returned to their assigned quarters, the crisis resolved and exhaustion claiming everyone. Petra remained in her corner, coffee long finished, eyes drifting closed despite her efforts to stay alert. Dominic stood to leave, then paused. Captain Lindholm. Petra. She opened her eyes. Yes, He struggled with the words, then settled on simple sincerity. Thank you for saving my team today, for forgiving my cruelty, for showing me what real strength looks like, for being exactly who you are without apology or pretense. You've taught me more about being a professional soldier in 3 days than I learned in 8 years of service. Petra smiled, genuinely this time, exhaustion and relief mixing in her expression. You're welcome, Dominic. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow we all have to figure out what comes next. He nodded and walked away, leaving her to her quiet recovery. As he exited the operations center, he looked back once. She'd closed her eyes again, head resting against the wall, rifle case beside her chair like a faithful companion. Songbird at rest, legendary capabilities temporarily stored, but never truly diminished. And he understood finally that legends weren't built through loud displays of dominance or aggressive assertion of superiority. They were built through quiet competence, unwavering professionalism, and the courage to do impossible things when circumstances demanded it. Petra embodied all of that, and he would spend the rest of his career trying to match even a fraction of her example. If you connected with this story, drop a comment about what resonated most with you, or share if you've witnessed someone reveal unexpected strength that completely changed how others saw them. Thanks for watching.